Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition is called the F grade. Now I'm going to try and be quite snappy this morning because it's actually freezing out. There's actually ice on the grass. So where do I start? Well, last week was dominated with the results of Kensington and Chelsea's GCSE style examination by the Grenfell Recovery Task Force. And what do they get? Well, we know the score already. It was a great big F. The council was branded antiquated, out of touch with residents, kind of stuck in a mode where they lacked innovation. It was an abysmal score, and there are many reasons for this. One, for example, residents have been called into meetings time and time again, virtually every single week, and they're actually suffering from fatigue, meeting fatigue. It's actually a real thing. It's a situation where you're meeting officials continuously. They're always giving their sympathies, but nothing's changing. It's sort of like the changes are so incremental. It actually feels like everything's just going back to how it always was, really, with a council ignoring all the main concerns. I think the biggest issue with Kensington and Chelsea is the lack of trust people have. You've got to remember, when Elizabeth came in to replace the former head, that's Nick and his mate, the media kind of talking about this new change at the top. And she was talking about bringing in this new energy, judge her on her achievements, not on her status and her privilege. But the reality of the situation is that Nick and his mate are still employees of the council. They haven't resigned.
Now, are you aware that particularly the Grenfell Action Group, but others, have been warning of dangers in the building?
Well, there was a major refurbishment of the tower starting about 2.5 years ago and completed last summer. There were inevitably a lot of issues about that because we were replacing heating systems, boilers, hot water, the windows and the external cladding. And yes, I know some of the residents were concerned about the refurbishment, but they will have discussed that and been consulted on that by the tenant management organisation.
But in the 21st century, this is a human disaster of absolutely catastrophic proportions. And I mean, it's clearly man-made.
And you see, it's very difficult for anyone to have trust in the council where it's most likely that the former head, the former deputy head, are actually still mentoring and running things from behind the scenes. How can you actually trust that council? Now, it would have been a quick win for Elizabeth and her team to actually just force them to resign, force them to step down and not just do this symbolic move. But again, like I said, a big fat F. You've also got to remember that 5 months on from the massacre, the families still haven't got a total list of all those people who were lost in the fire. They still don't know. The numbers are still stuck. Everyone's focusing on the housing situation. The other issues that are called for justice is actually being ignored. But let me move on from that and come back to that later, because of course, when any examination mark comes in which you don't like, there's going to be some people who are going to fight back and not take any responsibility. And last week we saw Elizabeth. She came out with some outrageous statements, making a point that the council had no responsibility for the fire safety of those tenants. No, Elizabeth, you can't pass the buck like that. As the head of the council, and this is why I say there's no trust in the council, and this is why people believe that when you're trying to pass a buck like this, you're trying to protect your mates who are mentoring you and pulling the strings behind the scenes. The council bears total responsibility, as does the TMO. Also, in defence of her time at the helm, Elizabeth has also pledged that Grenfell families will be housed or can be housed, and this is where I want to kind of like highlight a little snide tactic that she used, that they can be housed or will be housed within 12 months. And those that want to be housed before Christmas will be permanently rehoused. God, I said housed a lot of times this season, didn't I? Now, the snide bit was the comment about those who want to be permanently rehoused. Complete unnecessary comment. And again, it's pushing out this idea that the Grenfell families are actually deliberately making themselves homeless, intentionally homeless. This is why we can't trust you when you do comments like that. And that's not the only thing that you did, because there was something I would have actually applauded. Now, the council has actually made this decision, and it's a good decision on the face of it, where they're saying that all the families, and that's those in Grenfell, those in the walkways who are in emergency accommodation, we're talking about B&Bs and hotels, all of them, well, they're going to be exempt from paying rent and service charges until July 2019. Now, this is actually a very good thing. I mean, I don't think it goes far enough. I think that everybody who was affected in that area should be exempt from paying council taxes for the rest of their lives. If I was let down by a shop with bad service, I wouldn't go back in that shop. Likewise, if I paid a service charge to a council and they burnt my family alive, I'd never put any money into their coffers ever again. But hey, that's me. But no, why I say this should be a good outcome and why I'm a bit suspect, and the snide bit again, is because if you listen to the council meeting, this closed council meeting, where they're sitting around a table seconding this motion, and it's a great piece of PR, there's a comment right at the end about that this should actually provide a disincentive for those who are in emergency accommodation.
Are you happy that the council pays the main utility group bills until the end of June 2019 and waives the council tax and pays council tax residents who've chosen to live out of the borough until June 2019? Agreed. So you understand that we hope that this will minimise the disincentive for people to move out of hotels because we're having an end date to the amount of time.
Very, very sensible.
It's very, very clear. Okay.
You see that right there? That disincentive? That's facetious. That again is the snideness of the council trying to say that, look, these residents are trying to find any excuse to avoid their responsibilities. You're starting to pass the buck back on the victims. You call it victim shaming. And it's the reason why the trust situation is a big one. It's the reason why the council got a huge big F. Now, last week also saw a major spotlight on the children of the Grenfell families. Some 170 plus still inside B&Bs and in hotels and really just having a miserable time of it. And some fantastic journalism from Channel 4 and The Guardian who remain people-centred.
Ti senti impotente davanti a una cosa così e non sai come aiutarla, la persona che è di là, la persona che ami di più, la persona che è un pezzo di te. Come la aiuti? Con le parole? Sì. Ma non ci credi? Non ci credi a quello che sta succedendo, non ci credi a quello che ti viene detto. È impossibile che a Londra succeda una cosa del genere. È impossibile che non si riesca a scappare, a scendere le scale. I messaggi un po' a tutte le sue amiche, a noi e a una sua cugina, in particolare Giorgia, dove esprimeva dei sentimenti molto, molto importanti, molto profondi, che ora non mi sento di dire, perché sono cose talmente intime, talmente belle, talmente forti, che non mi sento di dire. Non ora, non so se lo farò mai, ma non ora.
But of course, when I said there's a lot of media activity last week, I'm also mindful, and this is me, the cynic in me, I'm also aware that there's going to be a debate about did journalists fail the Grenfell families or the Grenfell community. And of course, none of the media organisations want to take the blame. But whilst I'm sure that debate will really just focus on the mainstream media, let's be honest, it's the independents like the Canary, like Vice, like Rebel City, the Workers' Hammer, all these different range of independent papers that have really been carrying the torch. And of course, there are those thousands on social media using online blogs that are keeping the topic alive, keeping the information flowing. And so it comes back to a question of justice. Right now, you'd believe that the housing situation is the most important issue in the world when it comes to securing justice for the Grenfell families. I want to give it a different spin. I want you to think of this in the terms of insurance. And I would argue that you have an accident, insurance company wants to make things right, make things good. This is before we're talking about any punitive issues. And where we're at is at the courtesy car stage. The families are in emergency accommodation. They haven't even got their replacement car. They don't have a permanent house. This has got nothing to do with justice. This is just to do with reparation and restoration. This is why the council got its huge big F. I mean, even from a financial perspective, if you think about the fact that even the charities alone raised some £21 million. What happened to that money? Well, the Charities Commission last week issued a report, and we know that there's still 7 million that's been unallocated. 7 million. And when I say that that's a Charities Commission's report, we're still not talking about all the millions of different organisations. I guess a bit of an exaggeration, but the hundreds and perhaps thousands of organisations that had fundraising benefits for Grenfell and kept the money. And yeah, I said it. Some people out there raised money under the name of Grenfell and kept it. And unfortunately, Grenfell MediaWatch team, we don't have the investigative powers or the resources to actually track those people down. But again, that's theft, that's fraud. However, even though processes of justice for the families may be stalling, social justice concerns are still moving ahead. Now, I talked about the council getting a huge big F, but also that grade should be shared with the government. Because last week we saw 1.3 million being allocated to the Houses of Parliament, having, guess what? Sprinklers installed. Now, I hope you can appreciate how feisty this is. Now, only 2% of tower blocks in the UK are fitted with fire sprinklers, and yet the government is quick to make sure that they can spend 1.2 million on their own safety, whilst councils all up and down the country are being starved of funds. In fact, it's got so bad that I think Wandsworth Council is actually charging the residents £4,000 each to actually install fire sprinklers on their own properties. Do you get that? The Pride of Britain Awards, where the Grenfell community was actually recognised for the fantastic work they have done in coming together, providing leadership and government when the councils and those that they pay taxes to do so failed.
In the immediate aftermath of the fire, hundreds of people had been displaced from their homes. They had nowhere to go and were desperate to find loved ones.
I think something kicked in everybody. It's this instinct trying to help.
Without us and all the helpers, our community would never recover from this. We had to step in and fix it.
We had volunteers that were able to help us all. Our neighbours and our loved ones helped us.
We're going to get through this, and we keep strong, keep together as one.
With all us positive volunteers and community members, we can bring some goodness to this world.
Many people have been involved, but to receive the Special Recognition Award are just some members of the large Grenfell community. Please welcome them.
Yet while I'm sitting there watching those seated applauding the Grenfell communities, this little voice in my head says, yeah, we don't really need your clapping. We need your political influence. We need your artistic endeavours to bring pressure on this government, on the local councils, on all the services that are failing the Grenfell communities.
We would like to thank all of the volunteers and the community organisations that have been supporting us since the morning of the fire.
It's all very well dressing up in your best suits and sipping champagne and pretending that, yes, we're doing the right thing by celebrating the Grenfell communities, but you go back to your cosy little homes and we go back to the nightmares that you've created for us. That's not justice. Right now, we still have children who are remembering their friends in dream jars because they can't let go, and yet they can't tangibly deal with the issues. So I'm going to close, my hands are freezing. I want to big up the Grenfell MediaWatch team as well. Many of you know me as the face of Grenfell MediaWatch, but there's a whole team of us behind the scenes. Last week there was a wealth of media information that we had to sift through, and I couldn't have done that all by myself. So I want to give thanks to everyone who's actually involved. I hope to see many of you on the silent march tomorrow. But like I said, I'm going to sign off. So may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.